Okay, so I am making this video just to sort of go over some of my own personal history and talk a little bit about my story and what has led me to become a childbirth educator and what has inspired my passion for childbirth and motherhood and pregnancy. It all started probably when I found out I was pregnant with my first son back in 2011. And I decided I did not want to have a hospital birth. Prior to becoming pregnant, about 2 years prior to that, I was just watching Netflix and stumbled upon The Business of Being Born, the Ricky Lake documentary about home birth and about what the risks were with hospital birth. And I watched it, and it kind of spurred something in me that was already there. I sort of already had known within me that I did not want to have a hospital birth and that I wanted to have a midwife for the care that I would receive prior to having my child and also for the birth of my son. My mother actually had shared with me that she had had a midwife with me for her prenatal care and when I was born. And she told me that she hadn't had any interventions and that she had not had any drugs and that she was just able to give birth to me, and she knew that it was something that she just innately knew within her, that she would be able to give birth to me naturally without any medication. So when she told me that, I was put in her arms and that all of the pain that she had felt melted away and she was just in awe of this little creature in her arms. It's planted a seed within me. It made me realize that I could do this. When I decided to have my son out of the hospital, I knew that I had to find a place that I could have him, and I decided on Birth and Women's Center in Topeka, Kansas. This old Victorian house, and it feels like a home. And the midwives that I met, I became close with them, and especially one in particular. In my heart, I was hoping, I hope I get this one. And I've heard that you usually get the midwife that you hope for, and I did have her, and she was just so knowledgeable, and she had the most gentle hands. And I remember how she would palpate my belly, and there was so much wisdom in her fingers, and I could feel it as she felt around for my son. And our visits were long, 45 minutes to an hour. She knew about what was going on in my husband and I's life, and I was really changed by that experience. When I had him, our home was an hour away from the birthing center, and the day of my due date, I woke up to contraction. My labor just quickly accelerated. I started labor at 4 a.m. and by the time it was 5:30, 6, those contractions that I was having were 3 minutes apart, and we jumped in the car and we raced all the way to Topeka, and I had my first son within 30 minutes of getting there. But I remember just feeling so supported through that entire experience, and I remember how my husband was there and he was able to stand beside me on the bed and hold my hand, and he encouraged me when I felt like I just can't do it anymore. There was a point where I'm like, wait, I'm done. I also was very encouraged there through the childbirth education classes. I learned a lot about breastfeeding. I was not breastfed myself, and I had never really been exposed to breastfeeding. I just did not know anything about it, and through my pregnancy with my first son, I was encouraged by, number one, the childbirth ed classes that we had there. 6-week courses. I learned everything that I needed to know about birth and about what to expect, pregnancy nutrition, not in that order, and about breastfeeding classes. Now, I don't know so much about what is required in hospitals, but I don't think that you are required most of the time to take those classes. It makes a huge difference in the decisions that you make as a mom about your birth. I breastfed my son. I'm still breastfeeding him. He's 2.5. I got pregnant with my second son when my first son turned 1. very close in age, 21 months apart, I looked forward to my birth experience. We had moved after we graduated from college. I graduated from college in 2012 with a Bachelor's of Science in Worship Ministry and Biblical Studies from a Christian college here in Kansas. I was 35 weeks pregnant when I graduated, and my husband graduated from the state school here in Kansas. We moved up to Overland Park, Kansas, and I found the New Birth Company, which had recently opened up. I decided to go with that birthing center when I found out I was pregnant with my second son. I had my first son in Topeka. Water birth wasn't an option at that birthing center. It is now, but it wasn't then. And at this birth center where I had my second son, water birth was an option. And I wasn't sure that it was something I really wanted to do, but I did some research and I thought this would be an interesting choice. If it's something I want to do during labor, I think it would be a good option. My contractions were super close together very quickly, and so we rushed over to the birth center. Within an hour, Jonah was born in the water, and it was incredible. It was empowering. It was everything that I could dream of and more. I have this fire now that I want women to know that there are choices in birth and that they are constructed, designed to give birth naturally, and that interventions can be harmful. And I started watching so many birth documentaries. I started reading, I started listening to different podcasts, and I've mentioned this before in my midwifery assistant GoFundMe video, but I found my passion. I decided that I had wanted to do birth work, and I wasn't sure if it would be a midwife, becoming a midwife, or if it would first be becoming a doula, or if it would be first becoming a childbirth educator. It excites me and it fills my mind, and I'm just amazed at how God created us to give birth and how beautiful the process is and how spiritual the process is. So my birth experiences were very deep worship experiences. They were not just, oh, my body's a machine and it's broken and I need all this help from these other people, and that experience transformed me. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to become a midwife or a doula or a childbirth educator, but once I looked into everything a little bit more, I decided with my kids and with my schedules, childbirth education would be probably where I wanted to start. And so the New Birth Company where I had Jonah was having a kind of a homecoming event, which is kind of interesting. They do this every year. All the moms who have had their babies at the birthing center, they invite all of the families to come, and there's free ice cream and refreshments, and there's all of these vendors and all of these different groups there. And the week after I decided that this is what I wanted to do, and my husband and I had talked about it, there was a table there, the Greater Doulas of Kansas City, and I just happened to ask them what they would suggest for a childbirth education program, and there was one. The Academy of Certified Childbirth Educators had a program that was starting like 2 weeks post that. So I got signed up and I went, and it was incredible. One of the midwives from New Birth Company came and lectured on the very last day of training, and then I did all of the criteria and became certified recently. So then I found a midwifery assistant program at the farm in Summertown, Tennessee, where Ina Mae Gaskin and her fellow midwives began their home birth movement there and their practice, and and there's more about that in my midwifery assistant GoFundMe video. So that's sort of what led me to where I am now as far as my profession goes and where my passion is. But there's also a little bit of history that I recently found out through this. And the coolest thing, I think, is that birth work runs through both sides of my family. My great-great-grandmother on my father's side, his mother, her grandmother, was a traditional midwife in Puerto Rico, and I found that so captivating and wonderful that there was someone in my family who would go home, house to house, charge $10 for prenatal and birth care and labor and birth work, and I was captivated by that, and it really made me feel like there was this calling. Birth changed me. I was very insecure, and I did not have a very high opinion of myself. I was completely unaware of what my body was capable of, but not just my body. My mentality was programmed to believe that I was broken, and I had so much body shame growing up, and I remember feeling shame that was almost just engraved in me about being a woman, and that naturally making me sort of inferior, and about being ashamed of what God had given me, and not having an awareness of my reproductive organs and what they were for and the structure. And I think that unawareness of my body and the way that God had designed me sort of had me feeling broken, and sort of had me feeling like, what was my purpose? Is my body just for sexuality? Are my breasts just for sexuality? No, they're for breastfeeding. God made your breasts to nourish your children, and being a mother has transformed me. Becoming educated about myself has changed me for the better, and I think I don't want women to be deprived of that. Every woman deserves a chance to be treated with respect. We hear about women's rights all the time. A right to choose what she does with her own body, a right to work as she pleases and live as she pleases, but we don't hear about women's rights and birth very much. During the most vulnerable time in your life, where you are giving birth to another human being, it seems as though we have relinquished our powers to obstetric care without question. I consider myself a birth activist because I really want my life's calling to be educating women so that they make informed choices surrounding their birth, and knowing what their bodies are made for, and knowing what their bodies are designed and created for. Every woman should have a chance at least to look at all of her options and make choices accordingly. Informed decision making is what's important, and allowing instincts to take part, realizing that birth is not just a mechanical act. It involves the mind, it involves the spirit, and it involves believing in oneself. I didn't expect to get pregnant my senior year of college, and I didn't expect to graduate with a degree that I wouldn't necessarily use in the conventional way in a church leading worship on Sundays. But I believe that my worship degree has led me closer to God, which has led me to the calling that He has for my life, and that is very exciting. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and I hope that we got to know each other a little bit more through this. I will be linking my birth stories and my blog, Childbirth, below, and I'll also be linking my GoFundMe campaign. I just want to thank you all for just hanging out with me and talking to me and listening to me and hearing my story. Thank you.